journey from commune to community, with a few stops in between, and a couple of lessons learned along the way. By its very nature, a commune has a greater sense of shared intention than a larger community, such as a village or town might have, but the success of both is dependent upon similar characteristics. My favorite visual metaphor to explain this is that of a woven tapestry. Both the strength and the beauty of a tapestry is completely dependent upon the individual threads that created that tapestry and how they interact. My personal journey towards the creation of a particular tapestry started in 1970 in Easton, Pennsylvania at Lafayette College, where a group of friends got together who didn't really fit into the dorm scene or the fraternity scene, and we rented a very large house off campus. We called ourselves the Baloney Brothers and Sisters. Now, we did that so as not to be taken too seriously, but after a short period of time, that to be called a baloney became very much a term of endearment. So here's the Baloney house. And we're all standing on the front steps there. I'm somewhere in the middle up there. And life at the Baloney house was a great deal of fun. We had a lot of parties, and there was a fair amount of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Those were the times. But as time went by and we bonded more deeply, we entered into more intentional activities as well. We were very much against the Vietnam War, and we actually walked most of the way to Washington, D.C. to protest that war. We had group meditations. We had very spiritual and supportive group trips, and we even had classes at the Baloney house. I remember my senior year in my third floor bedroom, we had a fabulous literature class. For credit, I still wonder if the college knew the professor had that class there. But towards the end of our stay at Lafayette, none of us wanted to pursue the path our parents had laid out for us, a more traditional path. We were more interested in the counterculture and the back to the land movement. One of us, Corb Moister, had grown up in Norwich, Vermont, not far from here, and we had made a number of trips up to this part of Vermont, which for most of us, we were mostly suburban kids, seemed like an exotic area. And we all moved to Vermont together in 1972. And we lived in rented houses at first until we finally got it together to get the money together and find a piece of land. And we found 50 somewhat north-facing acres of land on the Beaver Meadow Road in Sharon, Vermont, about 30 miles from here. And we called the commune the land. We started out with the necessities. We built outhouses, and then we built little places to live throughout the woods. I had a wooden platform with steps leading up to it and a 2-room tent on it. And we went a little uphill from there and found a spring and ran a line to a tree where I'd lashed a sink. And so I had running water, very cold running water. If you walked further up into the woods, you would come across a very big yurt, and then a little further up, a teepee, and then other small structures. The very first wooden structure we built was a small cabin called the rhombus, because none of the walls were particularly parallel. We had a wonderful old green school bus pulled up way into the woods. It had a stove on it, and that's where we had our meals and our meetings to decide who was going to do what and where. Right near the bus was the one level field we had where we grew a lot of food, and we had a root cellar to store some of that food. We had a number of life cycle events. We had one death, the loss of dear Boo, and we had a number of marriages, and eventually some babies came along. Here's a picture. Oh, there's a picture of my license plate, second year in Vermont. And there is a picture of one of the weddings. There's Todd and Susie in the back, and just barely behind them on the left, you can see the bus where we all ate and had kind of a wooden covering over it. The biggest project we undertook was to build a large home. And I remember going to Exeter, New Hampshire to assist in taking down a barn and bringing the beams back to the land in Sharon. And whoops, that's the one I want. That's right after we unloaded a bunch of the beams. That's me feeling a bit tired, as I recall. And we built this very large house right near the road. Matty Cardillo was the main carpenter who guided us, and up it went. Matty still lives in that house. At the same time that I enjoyed commune life, I had a life off of the land itself as well. For one thing, I needed to earn some money for myself and to contribute to the commune. And so I joined the dish crew at the Hanover Inn. It was a great crew of guys, and we had a lot of fun. That was one day on the back loading dock where we were doing our James Dean Rebel Without a Cause impression, and I'm looking tough there. And anyway, being a member of the Hanover Dish Crew, which was owned by Dartmouth College at that time, I was entitled to take classes at an extremely affordable rate. And I decided to take, having an English degree from Lafayette, to do all my pre-med classes at Dartmouth. I was going to become some kind of a doctor. I cannot tell you how ecstatic my Jewish mother was to hear this. So a little ways into that journey, I had a bit of a dental emergency, and I needed a root canal. I went to a dental office that was very stark. There were no images around at all. The only sound you could hear was the drill going and maybe some sounds of pain from me. And I thought later, why does it have to be this way? Why? There should be quadraphonic sound and beautiful images going on the ceiling and maybe some nitrous oxide to relieve anxiety. And so I switched my medical direction to a dental one and said, I was going to be a great hippie dentist in Vermont with an office like I imagined. I did well at Dartmouth. I took my MedCat exams and did well, and I was applied and got into the University of Pennsylvania School of Dental Medicine, class of 1976. On November 30th of 1975, it was my last day on the commune. I left work at the Hanover Inn during one of the biggest ice storms I'd ever experienced. With great difficulty, I made it up to the tent, where I found my girlfriend, Jenny, completely encased within her sleeping bag, but her long hair out on the pillow, totally covered in ice. A tear had happened in the tent. I woke Jenny up. I said, this is awful. I don't think we can stay here. And she said, I agree. We broke the ice off her hair, gathered up what we could, and slid down the hill, got in a car, and drove to a house on the northern edge of Woodstock, where there was kind of an adjunct Baloney house with a lot of our friends lived. And we moved in around 2:30 in the morning. For the next 9 years, I was not involved in a large tapestry such as the Baloney Brothers, but rather pursued the goals I'd started and went to the University of Pennsylvania Dental School. I was there for a year, did well academically, but for reasons that are too long to go into, I took a leave of absence at the end of that year and worked off my dental karma by going to India with a fellow Baloney, Mickey Dalal, who'd grown up there. And he had discovered and turned me on to this absolutely fantastic Ayurvedic toothpaste. 19 fabulous herbs with a concentrated currant juice as the sweetener, totally organic. We visited the farms where this stuff was grown, and we got into a contract with the company that made this toothpaste, redesigned the packaging, came back to America with the first large shipment. We spread out and went to all these health food distributors and sold the entire shipment out. It was a great success at first. We ordered a much bigger shipment. Unbeknownst to us, the current crop had failed in India, and not knowing what to do, they decided to put a little saccharin in the formula. Someone in Boston did a lab test after we'd come back and started distributing that, and we lost all our contracts within a few weeks. The business was over. And there I am at this house in Woodstock, no longer connected to the tapestry of the Baloneys at that time, and my first business venture gone. I was a loose thread. I remember going into the village in Woodstock, and one of those days, and a woman who owned a small shop there said, "Jeffrey, I'm going off to law school. Do you know anyone who might want to be interested in buying my inventory? Otherwise, I'm going to have a closeout sale." I said, "Let me speak to someone." I went back to the home and I lived in, spoke to Andrea, who was a housemate. We pooled our money and we bought her inventory, which wasn't very large, and we started a venture that we knew nothing about, a retail business. We called it Unicorn. That was 1978. And we filled Unicorn with jewelry, crafts, ingenious presents, greeting cards, toys, clothing back in those days, and a lot of baskets because we really couldn't afford to fill it with everything we wanted, and baskets were cheap. And I remember, I'll never forget the day, Lawrence Rockefeller bought the building I was in. And Lawrence and Mary Billings came into the store to introduce themselves as my landlord. Mr. Rockefeller looked around. He looked a bit puzzled, and he said to me, "Mr. Kahn, do you really think you're going to last very long here?" And I said, "I sure hope so, Mr. Rockefeller." And he said, "Well, good luck to you, but I want you to know your rent is due the first day of each month." I really regret never having had the opportunity before he passed a couple of decades later to get back to him and say, "Mr. Rockefeller, I'm still here." And in a couple of months, Unicorn will be 45 years old and still going strong. Thank you. So the next few years of my life were filled with getting married to Andrea, having my daughter Justine, my daughter Tess, and the store being a success. But something was missing that I really felt a need to be involved in, and that was something like the Baloney Brothers, contributing to a common goal with a group of people. So I got involved in organizations here in Woodstock. And first I was on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce. And then I joined the board of directors of Pentangle Council on the Arts, which is a fantastic, important part of the fabric of Woodstock. And I was on that board for nearly 20 years. Then in 1988, I went to a Hanukkah party at the Universalist Chapel in Woodstock. I had not been involved in any form of organized religion as a participant since my bar mitzvah at age 13. But I liked the people I met there, and in particular, Stort and Antoinette Matlins, who became the founders and spiritual leaders of the Woodstock area Jewish community, and I decided to join in the weaving of that tapestry. At our very first Rosh Hashanah dinner, which was at the Masonic Temple here in Woodstock, I was there divorced and raising 2 children, my 2 girls, and I met a woman, looking at her name tag, and it said Rachel Kahn. Well, I talked to Rachel for quite a bit that evening, and 1 year later she became Rachel Kahn. And and we were both involved in the Jewish community, and the community needed a home, and the community bought a big property in West Woodstock. It had a barn that wasn't in good shape, and we had a man from Chelsea come down and take the barn down and take the beams away, which reminded me of the Baloney Brothers in a number of ways. The Woodstock area Jewish community was and still is a very egalitarian community with a lot of mixed families and based on volunteerism. Everyone pitches in. And so we decided to build a big barn-like sanctuary, and I was in charge of that. And it brought back all those days of building that house on the land. I later became president of the community for a number of years, and I taught at the Hebrew school on Sundays, relearning enough Hebrew to teach young children anyway, and I'm still involved. Rachel and I then moved to the village of Woodstock, and I became involved in local politics. I ran for election for the village board of trustees. Woodstock has 2 municipalities, the village being one of them. And I was on that board for quite a while. I got elected again and again, and eventually became chair of that board for a number of years. I'm still on that board as vice chair. And all of those different tapestries I was involved in were part of contributing to the community, but brought tremendous enrichment to my life. But what about the Baloney Brothers and Sisters? What happened? Well, in the late 70s, the physical tapestry had fallen apart, but the spiritual tapestry remained strong. And we've had reunions many, many, many years. Here we are on just a few years ago. That's the house we built from those timbers I described. And we're on the second floor balcony. And we have reunions every year, not always on the land, but usually in Massachusetts at Fred Renato's house. And when we arrive at these reunions, now we're in our 70s. It's like, whoa, it's kind of shocking. And after hugging each other and telling stories, we kind of get younger, and we're in our 60s or 50s. And then all the shared food and wine that we brought, we start getting into our 40s and 30s. A trip up to Fred's beautiful large bedroom, pipes are passed around, and we're in our 20s. And we are having so much fun. And the last thing I want to pass on to you is something I learned from the Baloney Brothers. And there's a motto on the wall at Unicorn that's been there for many years. And that is very simple. Do not grow up. It's a trap. And I believe in that, and I want all of you to believe in that as well. Thank you.